we have nowhere to run to. We haven't benefited from the manufacturing capacity for any of the therapeutic interventions that we have or could have in any way. So this is an area that we've got to be very proactive about on our continent. So our final panelist for today, and then we'll get back. I think we do have some minutes for questions. Excellent. Mr. Amin Adum currently leads the Directorate for Program Delivery and Coordination for the New Partnership for Africa's Development, NEPAD, this incredibly important agency that was brought into life a few years ago by the leaders of South Africa and Nigeria. Based in South Africa, NEPAD focuses on incubating high-impact projects that demonstrate the proof of concept to translate the AU's continental strategic development frameworks into national development priorities. Amin has worked in several high-level organizations in positions in the past, from the Africa Union Commission, EcoBank, and Nestle. So you see both in the private and public sectors. So Amin, I'll hand over to you. I look forward to meeting you, but first, we all look forward to hearing your talk for the next 5 minutes. Over.
Thank you, Professor, and good morning, everyone. First of all, let me recognize my two colleagues, Dr. Margaret from the African Union Commission and Dr. Margaret as well from the ODA NEPAD. In fact, we are working very closely together. And my speech is going to be just a continuation of Dr. Margaret from AUC, because she spoke really about most of the process we are going through actually. So I have been requested to speak about the existing regulatory processes within the African Union to facilitate vaccine uptake. And in fact, the processes are as follow, actually. So we have the African Medicine Regulatory Harmonization, the AMRH, which actually Margaret spoke about. It's an initiative partnership comprised of national medicine regulatory agencies in Africa, regional economic communities, ODA NEPAD, of course, the African Union Commission, obviously, Pan-African Parliament, WHO, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, DFID from the UK, Swiss Development Corporation. So it includes so many organizations. It has made a significant process in facilitating and engaging the RECs and the RECs regional economic communities, obviously, and African member states in addressing gaps in regulatory capacity. And as such, it has as well been recommended by the African Union Executive Council to lay down the foundation for the establishment of the AMA. Dr. Margaret have just spoken about. So AMRH works within the Pharmaceutical Framework Plan for Africa, the PMPA. So within the AMRH governance framework, and to avoid duplication, we have made sure that the African Vaccine Regulatory Forum, the AVAREF, which is managed by WHO Afro, has been recognized as a technical committee for AMRH, and specifically focusing on clinical trials for vaccine. And since 2016, it has expanded its scope for clinical trials for all medicines. So obviously, AVAREF supports development of technical guidelines and capacity strengthening for countries in clinical trials, oversight at the national level, but also at a regional level, especially for joint regional regulatory reviews. So the emphasis of ODA NEPAD, our organization, has been that in-country expertise participate in the regulatory and ethical clearance for vaccine under consideration by AVAREF. So these actually enhance ownership and uptake of this vaccine in participating countries, but also across the continent. Remember, we are a regional organization, and our role is really to bring bring support for more cross-fertilization and integration. So in addition, various national medicine regulatory agencies and AMRH participating RECs have established expert working groups on clinical trials, including on vaccine to domesticate AVAREF guidelines, particularly at country level, who retain sovereignty in decision-making with regard to registration of vaccine for use in their countries. So AMRH also advocates on reliance models and uptake of vaccine that have been recommended by WHO pre-qualification programs for vaccine or for vaccine. So at the national level, we continue to emphasize on strengthening and resourcing the capacity for ethical clearance by institutional review boards and national ethics committees, as well as the national medicine regulatory agencies for regulatory oversight for all vaccine, including COVID-19 vaccine, currently under development. So we also advise expedited and fast-tracking review of priority vaccine, including for COVID-19 that come actually online through AVRF, REX harmonization initiative, or through member states regulatory process. So for instance, the AVRF guidance for emergency preparedness provide for an overall timeline of 10 working days for processing of clinical trials application, where the product is already registered for other indication, and 15 working days for novel and new products. So finally, ODA-NEPAD through IMRH has been very active in partnering with African vaccine manufacturing initiatives, especially to guide on regulatory processes as the continent explores currently opportunities to enhance long-term manufacturing capacity for vaccine on the continent. And I would stop here because I only have 5 minutes. I thank you for your attention.
Prof? Thanks, Amin. Very important issues you raised. Thank you. And let me say firstly, thank you to all the panelists for an incredible session so far. So we'll now throw this open to questions. I have seen a few come in already, so I'll pick up the first one, and maybe we'll start with Gitinji and then see who else wants to come in. The first question really is around the digital divide and community engagement. And the question really focuses on whether you think, and I think any of the panelists can comment, you think the digital divide is a challenge for community engagement. But I also want to spin it positive. Do you think there's an opportunity to be more proactive with increased access to technology, phones, online, in terms of how we think about community engagement? Do you want to start?
May I just come in? Sorry, I'm so sorry to interrupt. It's Helen here because I have to jump off. Okay. But I'm happy to answer, I think it was Sandile's question just before I jump off.
Okay, please, why don't you go ahead since you have to leave, and then we'll continue after that.
I do apologize. I'm going on to a Gavi board meeting, so I apologize for that. But Sandile, not in the Q&A, but in the chat, he asked 2 important questions. One was, why is the first trial that's taking place for a COVID vaccine in the African region being led by someone from the United Kingdom, excuse me. And the answer is that many of the vaccines that we're seeing now, the candidate vaccines, of which there are over 200, have been developed in the, if you like, the global north, with the exception and in addition to China, that's got quite a significant number of vaccines, and India as well. But many of them have come from Europe, from the US. And this one was developed in the University of Oxford and has been tested now in the UK. The study that's being undertaken in South Africa is an independent part of that vaccine development program. And it's actually led by a South African scientist, Professor Shabir Mahdi. So it is an African-led initiative, but the vaccine itself, you're quite right, was developed. But there is a reason that we don't really have, and it's really good to hear what colleagues have just said. We would love to have more ability to develop vaccine candidates and develop our manufacturing, everything that's just been said in this region, and we need to build up to that. But that is the first comment. The second comment was about the Madagascan traditional medicines and about traditional medicines and why are we not looking at these? And it's a really important comment because, as you know, Artemisia was identified, including by the Madagascan president, as something that could potentially help. So as you know, this is a traditional medicine that has been used particularly for malaria, both prevention and treatment. Now, the problem with this virus is that it's brand new. And so for traditional medicines and for existing medicines and for new medicines, we don't know if anything works. Every single category, we have no idea. The only way to find out is to actually do proper trials, which is what many people have been referring to here. And in fact, at the request of the South African and the AU, the South African Department of Science and Innovation are in dialogue with the Madagascan leadership to see how we can support them in developing a development program that will have proper assessments in it. But it's an important point. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. Two very important questions. So I'm actually very happy you took that up. So let me go back to Gitinja to pick up the question, and then on community engagement and technology. And Linda, just to prepare, I'll come to you on GPP for situations. So, Gitinja.
Thank you, Chikwe, and thank you for that question. I think the first thing, the facts are that the number of people with access to mobile phones is going down, is going up, so smartphones are accessible. But we must also remember that, you know, we have to ask ourselves the question whether these smartphones are being used the way we expect they're being used. We know that a lot of people who have these phones out there use them purely for receiving calls, and even those with smartphones, they don't have enough memory to hold an app that can be used for communication. They use them as cameras for WhatsApp. The next thing we have to ask ourselves is, even if we have such a high penetration of mobile phones, the question is around who is the target audience for this. We know that when the vaccines come, we are going to focus on the most vulnerable first, and these are people above 60. These are people with comorbidities. How can, you know, are they fully operational on digital platforms? My own mother is, is a target. She has asthma. She is 84 now. She has a phone, and she's had a phone for years. But even when I send her money on mobile money, I have to call her and tell her, hey, ma'am, I've sent you money. Please go to the local shop and tell them to remove it for you. So we have to remember that even as we think about technology, we must not make technology a new kind of inequality. So we must remember that. Therefore, I have only two recommendations as I close, Chikwe. One, we need to think about, I think Africa CDC and AVRF need to think very closely about doing an attitude study right now on preparedness for a COVID vaccine. What are the strengths and the likely challenges to a vaccine? And needs to be done right now across Africa. Secondly, we need out of that study to develop a core strategy, communication strategy that includes community participation and community health workers who then can use digital to learn and then use their digital, which is their fingers and their mouth, to teach. Thank you, Chikwe.
Thank you. Fantastic end to that question. So, Linda, I hope you're still online. Can you pick up on the question on GPP for emergency situations like we face at the moment?
Thanks, Chikwe. I'll turn on my video just for this. I appreciate the question. I think this is important. I was asked to talk about GPP in the context of vaccine trials, and so the good participatory practice was what came to mind. But absolutely right, the listener who put forward the GPP for emerging pathogens or emergency situations, these were put together by a very similar author. Kate Hankins from UNAIDS at the time was the one who fashioned GPP for clinical trials, and she had a hand in the EP one as well. So they're very similarly structured. What is important about the EP one is that it also embraces epidemiological studies, other kinds of things that might happen in the context of an emerging pathogen. And so that is really important, but very similar principles of transparency, of respect, of understanding your community, understanding their priorities, getting in early and staying integrated. So I think the two can really be applied side by side. And I, again, absolutely encourage all of the people involved in this conference today to get hold of those guidelines, immerse themselves, and make sure that everybody in their vicinity is aware of them and has read them, and what's more, applies them.
Thank you, Linda. I'll do the last question for the session before we have to run off to William. William, are you still online? Okay, so I think we've lost Professor Ampofo. So maybe I'll throw this questions to anyone.
Chikwe, I'm here.
Okay,
Chikwe,
okay,
I'm
William,
here.
thanks a lot,
I'm here.
thanks. Yeah, so I think the other question I just wanted to share with you in terms of, many of the diseases, the infectious diseases, both emerging, re-emerging, maybe apart from COVID now, all the others, many of the others at least, have come out of the continent. And we're beginning, but very early days in engaging with this from a science point of view. But you have been a leader on this from the very beginning. How do you think we can get more attention to the work that you, all of us are doing collectively from both the population and our governments in the light of this current outbreak? Over.
Yes, Chikwe, I don't know whether you want the answer from the regulatory point of view or from the
take it from the general. I think the regulatory point of view is important, but not the only issue. So you have 2 minutes to just use that to round up.
Yeah, I think that the situation tells us how we really need to push forward together, as scientists and as advocates. I think this has been an excellent opportunity for the policymakers and the technocrats and the political authority to work together. Our own, national task force is chaired by the president himself. They meet twice a week, and he relies on the scientists and the technocrats to use the best available evidence to guide the policy decision. I mean, this is the best scenario you can have to respond to a major public health threat. So we need to push this through, use this working platform, working scenario to get the best possible resources to improve our health infrastructure. And this strategy, look, I mean, I have my Minister of Health who has COVID, okay? And for me, what else than for the minister himself to understand what needs to be done? He told me yesterday, he has malaria. He said, look, the fact that I have malaria, because we tested him and he was positive for malaria. He says, look, I've recovered from COVID and look, now I have malaria. I have to tell my director of health services, tell everybody, don't forget about malaria. Don't forget about the basic problems that confront us. And therefore, he just seen the value of the lab test. He's seen the value of having an effective response system. He's seen the value of having PPEs for his frontline health workers. He's seen the value of having logistics in place, drugs, supplies to ensure that the health workers deliver. So for me, this is an excellent opportunity for the policymakers, the technocrats, the scientists, everybody to work together. And as we've heard, to use social media to put the right information so our people will work together with us. Over.
Thank you, William. I couldn't have said it better. To me, just like this seems to be a moment for social justice in the West, and we watch this on our TV screens every evening. I think this is a moment for infectious disease research, vaccinology on the continent. And if we don't use this moment, where we, for better or worse, we have the political attention, we have the attention of our people, we will regret it forever. So I couldn't be more grateful to the Africa CDC for putting together this incredibly important conference, especially this incredible panel. So on behalf of my co-panelist and myself, who is doing something very important, Professor Jean-Jacques Muyembe, who of course everyone on this panel knows and recognizes for his groundbreaking work on Ebola and many other infectious diseases in the DRC. Listen, thank you very much to all our panelists. It's been an incredibly interesting session. Thank you to everyone that has joined the panel, all the participants for all your questions. We couldn't come to all of them, but I'm sure they'll be archived and the conversation will continue. But the purpose of a conference is always twofold. Firstly, to interrogate the science, but secondly, to bring the matters to the attention of ourselves, share information, build networks, and we've done the very best given the limitations that we have with technology and not being able to meet physically. So thank you very much for everyone. I hope we've all enjoyed this session, and I look forward to the rest of the conference. John, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chike, for an excellent session.
Thank you.
Great. This is great. I mean, Chike, you see that an online conference can work. We are all learning how to use technology to to leave. So this has been an extremely important session, really great great participation, great contribution, and we've all learned a lot. So thank you all. Let me then introduce the next session. The next session, that is session number 5, which will be moderated by Professor Marofi and Professor Francine